Select character screen. Press square to continue. Select character screen. Press square to select Wizard King. Select character screen. Press square to continue. Select character screen. Press square to select Wizard King. Loading. Please wait. Loading. Please wait. Select character screen. Press square to continue. Select character screen. Press square to select. For text chat with other players, press the left button to open chat. Type message, then press square to send chat. Please wait. For proximity voice chat with other players, press and hold the left button while speaking. Wade Sen says, I'll head to Toy Maker. For text chat with other players, BBDC says, X Toy Maker. Type message, then Gameta says, sure. Please wait. For proximity Dollhouse says, with other players, press and hold the left button. Cress says, MB 85%. Wade Sen says, I'll head to Toy Maker. For text chat with other players, BBDC says, X Toy Maker.
This is already more fanfare than I had
Gameta
hoped for.
says, sure.
As far as coronations go, I would say this is fairly modest.
A ceremony befitting
Cress
our
says,
humble
MB
new queen.
85%.
Queen.
Wade Sen says,
I'm not sure I'll ever get used to hearing that.
No more stalling, my queen.
This is already
People of Prydwen, honored guests. As far as coronations go, I would say this together we have endured great hardships. But despite it all, a steady hand has guided us through the storm. May I present to you, may I present to you, people of Prydwen, Queen Jinche of Prydwen. Together we have endured great hardships. But despite it all, a steady hand has guided us through the storm. May I present to you, may I present to you, people of Prydwen, Queen Jinche of Prydwen.
I'm glad you made it. We waited as long as we could. I think the people, but it wouldn't have felt right without you. I was hoping your friend Grace would make an appearance today. But what's next for you? You would make fun. In the days of Artorias, they say it was the voice of Myrdin that called night. Some say he's...
Hector says, nice.
I think the people...
Cress says, next.
I was hoping your friend Grace would make an appearance today. But what's next for you? You would make fun. In the days of Artorias, they say it was the voice of Myrdin that called night. Some say he's...
Hector says, nice.
I think the people...
Cress says, next.
I was hoping your friend Grace would make an appearance today. But what's next for you? You would make fun. In the days of Artorias, they say it was the voice of Myrdin that called night. Some say he's...
Hector says, nice. Cress says, next. Cress says, Ebon Fort. Hector says, nice. Cress says, next. Cress says, Ebon Fort. Cress says, Ebon Fort.
Miserable thieves! Killing me is one thing, but stealing my life's work? Idiotti! Well, you would have if my workmen hadn't stopped. Safety is always the biggest. If you begin the hunt... Miserable thieves! Killing me is one thing, but stealing my life's work? Idiotti! Well, you would have if my workmen hadn't stopped. Safety is always the biggest. If you begin killing me is one thing, but stealing my life's work? Guilty. Well, you would have if my workmen hadn't stopped. Safety is always the biggest.
Dollhouse says, you guys rock 3. Dollhouse says, you guys rock 3. Disruptor bot says, anyone have 15 destruction glyphs I can buy? Dollhouse says, you guys rock 3. Disruptor bot says, anyone have 15 destruction glyphs I can buy? No Pooks To Give says, GF. No Pooks To Give says, GF. No Pooks To Give says, GF. Pestilence says, XWT. Pestilence says, XWT. Pestilence says, XWT. Rome says, XWT. Rome says, XWT. Genocide 1X says, I have some destruction glyphs I can sell you. McShadow says, anyone run Garden of Genis real fast please. Rome says, Genocide 1X says, I have some destruction glyphs I can sell you. McShadow says, anyone run Garden of Genis real fast please. Chickadee says, X-Gen DPS. McShadow says, anyone run Garden of Genis real fast please. Chickadee says, X-Gen DPS. McShadow says, anyone run Garden of Genis real fast please. Chickadee says, X-Gen DPS. McShadow says, one more for Genis please.
My notebook. Grazie. The one who my goal to truly have one.
McShadow says, one more for Genis please.
My notebook. Grazie. The one who my goal to truly have one.
McShadow says, one more for Genis please.
My goal to truly have one.
Krez says, Evan 85%. Krez says, Evan 85%.
On the surface, we are still and quiet. But there is a struggle in the darkness below.
McShadow says, anyone need one more for Genis please X.
Unpredictable. On the surface, we are still and quiet.
Zaxby says, Hive forming June 10th need some gamers. McShadow says,
I
anyone need
offer
one
you
more for Genis
nothing,
please
but
X.
you remain. I can give you a name if some have called me. Only if you do not own this stone.
Tradesman Bob Zero says, Cave 18/20 need some gamers. McShadow says,
I
anyone need
offer
one
you
more for Genis
nothing,
please
but
X.
you remain. I can give you a name if some have called me.
Tradesman Bob Zero says, Cave 18/20 need some gamers. McShadow says, anyone need one more for Genis please X.
I can give you a name.
Tradesman Bob Zero says, Cave 18/20 need some gamers. Tradesman Bob Zero says, Papa Freco 63 says, X up 4 arc.
In memory of Soul Warden Kramanos Avalon, bearer of the Eternum torch, who serve as straddle sentence. All souls feed.
Papa Freco 63 says, X up 4 arc.
Against his darkness until the end. May his sacrifice.
McShadow says, X Genis 2 of 3. Sir Dongus Lee says, X Gen.
All souls feed.
Papa Freco 63 says, X up 4 arc.
Against his darkness until the end. May his sacrifice.
Machado says, X Gen is 2 of 3. Sir Dongus Lee says, X Gen. Papa Freco 63 says, X Arc. Sir Dongus Lee says, X Gen. Papa Freco 63
In
says,
memory
X Arc.
of Soul Warden Christina Craig, whose gaze never wavered. Her pursuit of humanity's best nature, her defiance of darkness, and her calm wisdom kept the flame of our hope burning until the last. Of Soul Warden, may her sacrifice be a lesson to all who come after.
Zeron Clavin says, X Zaxby's if you still need PPL.
Of darkness, and her calm wisdom
Papa Freco 63 says, X up 4R.
until the last. Of Soul Warden, may her sacrifice be a lesson to all who come after.
Zeron Clavin says, X Zaxby's if you still need
This
PPL.
place is familiar.
Freaking Tilted says, X Gorgivase 63 says, X up 4R. Zeron Clavin says, X Zaxby's if you still need
This
PPL.
place is familiar.
Freaking Tilted says, X Gorgivase 63 says, X up 4R. Zaxby says, Hive forming August 10th need 2 gamers. Freaking Tilted says, X Gorgivase. Zaxby says, Hive forming August 10th need 2 gamers. Healing Groom says, X Cave. Papa Freco 63 says, X up 4R. Need 2 gamers. Healing Groom says, X Cave. Dokes says, X Cave. Killzone 1023 says, Ignited Replica Orichalcum Brutish Rapier, Electrified Replica Orichalcum Brutish Rapier. X Cave. Papa Freco 63 says, X Arc. Dokes says, X Cave. Killzone 1023 says, Ignited Replica Orichalcum Brutish Rapier, Electrified Replica Orichalcum Brutish Rapier. Papa Freco 63 says, McShadow says, 4 of 5 Genis Sup. X Cave. Killzone 1023 says, Ignited Replica Orichalcum Brutish Rapier, Electrified Replica Orichalcum Brutish Rapier. Papa Freco 63 says, McShadow says, 4 of 5 Genis Sup. Papa Freco 63 says, X up 4 arc real quick. Killzone 1023 says, X Gorg.
The ghosts are loud here.
Shadow says,
This
4 of
place
5 Genis
remembers
Sup.
sorrow.
Papa Freco
The voice
63
of that
says,
ghost
X
has
up 4
faded.
arc real Stin says, X Gorg. Killzone 1023 says, X Gorg. Papa Freco 63 says, X Gorg.
This
place remembers sorrow.
Jigsaw Puppet says, this game's still kicking. Stin says, X-Gore. Killzone 1023 says, X-Gore. Papafreco 63 says, X-Arc. Papafreco 63 says, X-Gore. Jigsaw Puppet says, this game's still kicking. Stin says, X-Gore. Papafreco 63 says, X-Arc. Papafreco 63 says, X-Gore. Jigsaw Puppet says, this game's still kicking.
In memory of Soul Warden Ray's Vita, devoted servant of the Order, he took no pride, no ambition in our sacred domain. All that was asked, and much that was not, he did willingly. In memory, by his example, did others embrace our greater purpose. Devoted servant may his sacrifice be a lesson to all who come in our sacred domain.
Papafreco 63 says, X up for Arc. Papafreco 63 says, X up for R. Papafreco 63 says, X up for R. Jasper Xenon 2 says, X Cave. Jasper Xenon 2 says, X Cave.
In memory of Soul Warden Constanza Soberia,
Grandmaster 4 says, X Cave.
may her sacrifice be a lesson for those who come after.
Jasper Xenon 2 says, X Cave. Grandmaster 4 says, X Cave. Psalm 11 says, X Cave.
Be a lesson for those who come after.
Jasper Xenon 2 says, X Cave.
I hear my own voice. Fate, but in my hands on the stone. It will take all of us.
Psalm 11 says,
But there
X
are
Cave.
answers. You speak. There are. Go on then.
Jasper Xenon 2 says, X Cave.
I hear my own voice. Fate, but in my hands on the stone. It will take all of us.
Psalm 11 says,
But
X
there are
Cave.
answers. You speak. There are. Go on then.
Jasper Xenon 2 says, X Cave.
I hear my own voice. Fate, but but in my hands on the stone, it will take all of us.
Psalm 11 says,
But there are
Craft Hound says, morning.
there are go on then.
Craft Hound says, morning. Bogare says, EE Green Power Ranger met your squad last night's Oper. Craft Hound says, morning. Bogare says, EE Green Power Ranger met your squad last night's Oper. Ghoul Seed says, Enrage is the good DPS set yes. Says, EE Green Power Ranger met your squad last night's Oper. Sweezy Faber SE says, you want at least one. Ghoul Seed says, Enrage is the good YU Mato says, any imp slash siren? Ghoul Seed says, KK tie. Sweezy Faber SE says, you want at least one. Ghoul Seed says, Enrage is the good YU Mato says, any imp slash siren? Ghoul Seed says, KK tie. Sweezy Faber SE says, you want at least one. YU Mato says, any imp slash siren? Ghoul Seed says, KK tie. Who says, anyone got a spare charge perk I can buy off them? Who says, anyone got a spare charge perk I can buy off them? Who says, anyone got a spare charge perk I can buy off them? Capafreco 63 says, Exarchka. DJ Eddie V says, GSGS. Tradesman Bob 0 says, Cave 18/20 says, Exarchka. DJ Eddie V says, GSGS. Princess Anya says, anyone need help with anything? I'm a healer. Jasper Xenon 2 says, XK/20. Antrooper says, healer. Trooper says, next over. Princess Anya says, anyone need help with anything? In a healer.
I, Gilgamesh,
Trade
do
Just
solemnly
Xenon
bow
2
under the
says,
radiance of the
XK.
sun and the luminescence of the
Trooper
stars.
says, healer.
In the presence of the gods,
Trooper
to
says,
serve
next over.
as an Amara, the blessed inheritor of the
Anya
eternal
says,
fire.
anyone need help with anything? In a healer.
I, Gilgamesh,
Trade
do
Just
solemnly
Xenon
bow
2
under
says,
the radiance of the sun
XK.
and the luminescence of the
Trooper
stars.
says, healer.
Presence of the gods,
Trooper
to
says, next
serve as
over.
an Amara, the blessed inheritor of the eternal fire. I vow to be both noble and true, to heed the divine voice, and to aid my people against all hardships and foes. I also swear on my bonded soul to ease the world's pain and to fulfill my sworn obligations regardless of the price. To heed the divine voice and to aid my people against all hardships and foes. I also, on my bonded soul, to ease the world's pain and to fulfill my sworn obligations regardless.
Trooper says, D. Grassy Knoll TV says, Lul. Trooper says, D. McShadow says, X Siren. Grassy Knoll TV says, Lul. McShadow says, X Siren. TV says, Lul.
And I am impressed. We will make history together.
I give my breath to the winds, my strength, and my spirit to the earth,
Kaust says, Bora Brassel Bleep.
and the depths of the waters.
We will make history together.
Tradesman Bob Zero says, Cave need more spelunking.
I give my breath to the winds, my strength, and my spirit.
Kaust says, Bora Brassel Bleep. Smelter says, CTF time. Tradesman Bob Zero says,
Well,
Cave need more
imagine the
spelunking.
kinds of people you run into on the roads around here. But you're looking a little haggard, if you don't mind me saying so. Thought I heard scuffling and doubt, but if
Bora Brassel Bleep. Smelter says, CTF time. Tradesman Bob Zero says,
well,
Cave need more
imagine the
spelunking.
kinds of people you run into on the roads around here. But you're looking a little haggard, if you don't mind me saying so. Thought I heard scuffling and doubt.
Yu Mato says, X Siren.
Welcome to Oxborough, traveler. Hope you brought coin to spend and goods to trade. We're always open for business.
The Folkier says, Merc is up. Yu Mato
Find in
says,
Oxborough.
X Siren.
I guarantee you that. All types for hire. He's
Welcome
quite,
to Oxborough, traveler.
balmy, you know?
Brought coin to
And
spend
I'm not.
goods
Mansa
to trade.
Musa says, X Merc.
Always open for business.
Ejuni Yor K9 says, X.
Merc is up. Yu Mato says,
Papa Freco 63 says, X up 4R.
All types for hire.
Grandmaster 4 says, Exemplary Ring, WTS.
Coin to spend. And I'm not.
Mansa Musa says, X Merc. Ejuni Yor K9 says, X.
Merc is up.
Ejuni Yor
Papa
K9
Freco
says,
63
Score.
says,
X up 4R.
All types for hire.
Grandmaster 4 says, Exemplary Ring, WTS.
Mansa Musa says,
Ejuni Yor K9 says, Evade or Spear.
Ejuni Yor K9 says, X. Merc is up.
Ejuni Yor
Papa
K9
Freco
says,
63
Score.
says, X up 4R. Grandmaster 4 says,
Papa Freco 63 says, X up 4R.
Mansa Musa says,
Ejuni Yor K9 says, Evade or Spear. Ejuni Yor K9 says, Score. Papa Freco 63 says, X up 4R.
showdown. You will never.
Machu says, X arc.
Evade or Spear.
Are you? What is the?
Papa
Step
Freco
right up.
63
Step
says,
right up
X up
for a
4R.
showdown.
Wade
You
Sen
will
says,
never-
X arc, X arc. Papa Freco 63 says, X up 4 arc real quick. Dami Mamai says, X cave 14/20. Tradesman Bob 0 says, need more cavers, 14/20. Yu Mato says, all the skins are unlocked, what's the point of arc? Dami Mamai says, X cave 14/20. Tradesman Bob 0 says, need more cavers, 14/20. Iting says, there's 2 chests there, all the skins are unlocked, PACKM4N says, right? Dami Mamai says, Jasper Xenon 2 says, X cave.
Always good to welcome a guest to Oxborough. Whatever you came to our fair city looking for.
says, there's 2
Happy to
chests
help.
there.
Comes through town now and then, often raving about
PACKM4N
corrupted.
says, right?
I've asked him in all this time.
Papa Freco 63 says, XARCCC.
Always good to welcome a guest to Oxborough. Whatever you came to our fair city looking for.
There's 2 chests there. Papa Freco 63 says, X up 4R.
I've asked him in all this
Iting
time.
says, PPL waiting at Merc. Says, XARCCC.
If you're here to request a ballad or perhaps
C408 says, X Gore. says, X up 4R. Iting says, PPL waiting at Merc. says, X Merc. Papa Freco 63 says, XP4 Merc real quick. Killzone 1023 says, I've muted more people in the last few days than my entire time playing this game. Kagya says, X-Gorg. PACKM4N says, free chest everywhere Capri Strength Tower. Killzone 1000 Lewis Ute 4 says, X-Gorg DPS. In the last few days than my entire time playing this game. Kagya says, X-Gorg. Connor of Scout says, me too. The end of time seems to have brought out the annoying players. Lewis Ute 4 says, loading. Please wait. Dollhouse says, X-Merc. The end of time. Mansa Musa says, X-Merc. Kaust says, X-Merc. Please wait. Bulwenda says, Xmerk says, Xmerk. Mansamusa Bullwinkle says, Xmerk. Houst says, Xmerk. Please wait. Gurjet says, Xmerk. PACKM4N says, Xmerk. Bulwenda says, Club Seeker says, Xmerk. Bullwinkle says, Xmerk. Houst says, Xmerk. Gurjet says, Xmerk. Healing Groom says, Xmerk. PACKM4N says, Xmerk. Houst says, Xmerk. Says, Xmerk. Bullwinkle says, Xmerk. Healing Groom says, Xmerk. PACKM4N says, Xmerk. Houst says, Xmerk. Says, Xmerk. Mansamusa says, X up for Merc now. Saracropolis says, Xmerk. Mansamusa says, Online Gamer says, Xmerk. Saracropolis says, Xmerk. Tradesman Bob Zero says, Dami Mommy DC of Wow How Wood. Gamer says, Xmerk. Tradesman Bob Zero says, October 20th Cave. Tradesman Bob Zero says, Dami Mommy DC of Wow How Wood. Gamer says, Xmerk. The Chocolate says, X Cave. Tradesman Bob Zero says, October 20th Cave. Tradesman Bob Zero says, Donnie Mommy DC of Wow How Wood. Mansamusa says, X up for Merc 11 of 20. Tradesman Bob Zero says, October 20th Cave. Tradesman Bob Zero says, Donnie Mommy DC of Wow How Wood. Mansamusa says, X up for Merc. Igorneus says, X Merc. Tradesman Bob Zero says, October 20th Cave. Aina says, X Merc. Ejunior K9 says, X Gorgivador Spear. Igorneus says, X Merc. Vocable says, X Gorg. Aina says, X Merc. Ejunior K9 says, X Gorgivador Spear. Igorneus says, X Merc. Vocable says, X Gorg. Aina says, X Merc. Ejunior K9 says, X Gorgivador Spear. Vocable says, X Gorg. Ejunior K9 says, X Gorgivador Spear. Kibi says, X Gorg. Jasperly says, X Gorg. Kibi says, X Gorg. Mansamusa says, not too late to X up for Merc. Jasperly says, X-Gore. Fizzy Eye says, X-Gore. Mansamusa says, not too late to X up for Merc. Yu Mato says, come through Siren after Merc, P. Mansamusa says, not too late to X up for Merc. Yu Mato says, come through Siren after Merc, P. Yu Mato says, come through Siren after Merc, P. Ejuni Your K9 says, X-Gore give 8 or spear. Ejuni Your K9 says, X-Gore give 8 or spear. New York 9 says, X-Gore give 8 or spear. Hyofu says, sudden reckoning, do you guys like my flail? Hyofu says, sudden reckoning, do you guys like my flail? Hyofu says, sudden reckoning, do you guys like my flail? Judge says, no. Judge says, no. Loading. Please wait. Says, no.
At last! Yes,
Loading.
this to great.
Please wait.
Now I must study this one.
Swiss says, X-Merc.
At last! Yes,
Loading.
this to great.
Please wait.
Now I must study this one.
Swiss says, X-Merc.
At last! Yes, this to great. Now I must study.
Swiss says, X-Merc. Swiss says, X-Merc asterisk. Okanon says, Scorp up.
Well,
Lavanya says, X-Zixorp.
of you some more.
Swiss says,
I also have
X-Merc
equipment
asterisk.
available, should you find it.
Hitori no Shida
Okanon
says, Gypsum Orb,
Scorp up.
400x. Lavanya says, X-Scrop.
Well,
Lavanya says, X-Zixorp.
some more.
Swiss says,
I also have
X-Merc
equipment
asterisk.
available, should you find it.
Hitori no Shida
Okanon
says,
says,
Gypsum Orb,
Scorp up.
400x. Lavanya says, X-Scrop. Lavanya says, X-Zixorp.
Some more.
Swiss says,
I also have
X-Merc
equipment
asterisk.
available, should you find it.
Hitori no Shida says, Gypsum Orb, 400x. Lavanya says, X-Scrop. Lavanya says, X-Zixorp. Sean 44 says, X-Scrotum. Hitori no Shida says, Gypsum Orb, 400x. Lavanya says, X-Scrop. Sean 44 says, X-Scrotum. Sean 44 says, X-Scrotum. Lewis Ude 4 says, X-Gorb DPS or healer. PACKM4N says, GG Merc. Lewis Ude 4 says, X-Gorb DPS or healer. PACKM4N says, GG Merc. Lavin Yaw says, X-Scrop April 20th. Lewis Ude 4 says, X-Gorb DPS or healer. Aina says, X-Scorp. PACKM4N says, GG Merc. Bulwenda says, X-Scorp. Says, X-Scrop April 20th. Alia says, X. Aina says, X-Scorp. Ejuni Yor K9 says, X. X-Scrop April 20th. Coda Bear 21 says, X-Scorp. Alia says, X. Aina says, X-Scorp. Ejuni Yor K9 says, X. Coda Bear 21 says, Psalm 11 says, X-Scorp. Alia says, X. Ejuni Yor K9 says, X. Coda Bear 21 says, Psalm 11 says, X-Scorp. Psalm 11 says, X-Scorp. Coda Bear 21 says, X-Scorp. Maka says, X-Scorp. Coda Bear 21 says, X-Scorp. Maka says, X-Scorp. Coda Bear 21 says, X-Scorp. Maka says, X-Scorp.
Well then, another care to bolster that reputation of yours some more? I also have equipment available, should you find the need.
Maka says, X-Scorp.
Well then, another care to bolster that reputation of yours some more? I also have equipment available, should you find the need. Well then, another care to bolster that reputation of yours some more? I also have equipment available, should you find the need.
Lunatera Lulu says, anyone selling bulk prismatic leather. Ejunior K9 says, X-Scorp. Lunatera Lulu says, any other WT. Prismatic leather. De Chocolate says, brutish exemplary ring. Ejunior K9 says, X-Scorp. Lunatera says, any other WT. Prismatic leather. De Chocolate says, brutish exemplary ring. Ejunior K9 says, X-Scorp. Ana says, any other WT.
Well then, another care to bolster that reputation of you some more. I also have equipment available, should you find the need. Well then, another care to bolster that reputation of you some more. I also have equipment available, should you find the need. Well then, another care to bolster that reputation of you some more. I also have equipment available, should you find the need. Well then, another care to bolster that reputation of you some more. I also have equipment available, should you find the need.
Yu Mato says, someone start a siren or imp.
Well then, another care to bolster that reputation of you some more. I also have equipment available,
Ana says,
should you
X-imp.
find the need.
Yu Mato says, someone start a siren or imp. Saracropolis says, X-Siren. Ana says, X-imp. Yu Mato says, X whoever's inviting for either of those two. Someone start a siren or imp. Saracropolis says, X-Siren. Ana says, X-imp. Lies 2 says, plate whoever's inviting for either of those two. Saracropolis says, X-Siren. Lies 2 says, plate boots. 0p says, found this, great axe, if only had gem slot. Loading. Please wait. Lies 2 says, plate boots. 0p says, found this, great axe, if only had gem slot. Loading. Please wait. Lies 2 says, plate boots. 0p says, found this, great axe, if only had gem slot. Loading. Please wait. Codabear 21 says, X-Siren. 0p says, found this, great axe, if only had gem slot. Loading. Please wait. Codabear 21 says, X-Siren. 0p says, found this, great axe, if only had gem slot. Loading. Please wait. Coda Bear 21 says, X Siren. Coda Bear 21 says, X Siren. Wig says, X Acr. Coda Bear 21 says, X Siren. Wig says, X Acr. Wig says, X Acr. Christian CC says, oh. Wig says, X Acr. Pecos Pete says, need help killing Papa Bear. Christian CC says, oh. Pecos Pete says, need help killing Papa Bear. Christian CC says, oh. Pecos Pete says, need help killing Papa Bear. Christian CC says, oh. Pecos Pete says, need help killing Papa Bear. Christian CC says, oh. N.K.D says, ha 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 ha. N.K.D says, ha 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 ha. N.K.D says, player Pocket no kill. N.K.D says, N.K.D says, 180 ms. N.K.D says, N.K.D says, N.K.D says, N.K.D says, player horrible. N.K.D Saracropolis says, N.K.D says, N.K.D says, player horrible.
I've gone and spoiled everything.
Saracropolis says,
Absolutely everything with my clumsiness. It was irreplaceable. A family, my family, there might be that. My family, there might be that.
History is filled with stories of pain. But ours will end in triumph. I promise you. Join me and we will achieve victory.
Pecos Pete says, tie. Pecos Pete says, tie. Pecos Pete says, tie.
We have fallen back to the tower. On all sides, the corrupted come for us. Our lines of defense are broken. Our compatriots, those who could cover the distance, have come to this ancient place seeking shelter. We are preparing for fallen back to the tower. We will make our stand here. They cannot not come for us. Our lines of defense are broken. Our compatriots,
Pecos Pete says, tie.
those who could cover the distance have come to this ancient place seeking shelter. We are preparing.
Says you says, anytime Pete. Pecos Pete says, tie.
Those who could cover the distance have come to this ancient place seeking shelter. We are preparing.
Says you says, anytime Pete. Ninja Turtle says, X Siren. Yu Mato says, X Siren. X Una X says, X Siren. Albi Bach says, X Siren. X Siren. Coda Bear 21 says, X Siren. Zeron Clavin says, X Siren. Mato says, X Siren. Grandmaster 4 says, X Siren. Says, X Siren. Says you says, X Siren. Box says, X Siren. Apex Astrid says, X Siren. 21 says, X Siren. U Darvish says, X Siren. Zeron Clavin says, X Siren. Grandmaster 4 says, X Siren. Grandmaster 4 says, X Siren. YN Otani says, X Siren. Says you says, X Siren. Rajcast says, X Siren. X Astrid says, X Siren. X Una X says, X Siren. U Darvish says, X Siren. Relay the Christ says, X Siren. Master 4 says, X Siren. Ejuni Your K9 says, X Siren. Tani says, X Siren. BMSCN says, Zyren. Cast says, X Siren. Wig says, X Siren. X Una X says, X Siren. Zeron Clavin says, LF1N for 6 Boss Kata. X Siren. Master 4 says, Grandmaster 4 says, X Siren. X Siren. Ninja Turtle says, X Siren. Zyren. Saracropolis says, X Siren. U Darvish says, X Siren. F1N for 6 Boss Kata. X Siren. Grandmaster 4 says, X Siren. X Siren. Ninja Turtle says, X Siren. Saracropolis says, X Siren. U Darvish says, X Siren. Grandmaster 4 says, X Siren. Grandmaster 4 says, X Siren. Ninja Turtle says, X Siren. X Una X says, hello. X Siren. U Darvish says, X Siren. Grandmaster 4 says, X Siren. X Una X says, hello. Grandmaster 4 says, X Siren. A Lonely Night says, X Siren. Grandmaster 4 says, Relay the Christ says, X Siren. YN Otani says, X Siren. Wig says, X Siren. Says you says, X Siren. X Siren. Grandmaster 4 says, Relay the Christ says, X Siren. YN Otani says, X Siren. Wig says, X Siren. Entropy says, X Siren. Says you says, X Siren. X Siren. Relay the Christ says, X Siren. YN Otani says, Bjark says, Great Axe. Wig says, X Siren. Entropy says, X Siren. Says you says, X Siren. Blade 21 says, X Siren. Tony Loco says, X Siren. Bjark says, Great Axe. Entropy says, X Siren. Emily Dax says, X Siren. Blade 21 says, X Siren. Tony Loco says, X Siren. Emily Dax says, X Siren. 21 says, X Siren. Tony Loco says, X Siren. Relay the Christ says, X Siren. Emily Dax says, X Siren. Relay the Christ says, X Siren. Relay the Christ says, X Siren. Relay the Christ says, X Siren. Ikaros says, Good fight. Relay the Christ says, X Siren. Ikaros says, Good fight. Lunatera Lulu says, Exemplary Amulet, 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 Exemplary Amulet. Icaro says, Good fight. Lunatera Lulu says, Exemplary Amulet, Exemplary Amulet. Lunatera Lulu says, Ignited Replica Orichalcum Brutish Great Axe, Abyssal Replica Orichalcum Brutish Great Axe, Frozen Replica Orichalcum Brutish Great Axe. Lunatera Lulu says, Exemplary Amulet, Exemplary Amulet. Lunatera Lulu says, Ignited Replica Orichalcum Brutish Great Axe, Abyssal Replica Orichalcum Brutish Great Axe, Frozen Replica Orichalcum Brutish Great Axe.
You have been to the tower in vain. We were not the first to stand against the corrupted.
Saracropolis says, Siren 18/20. Blade 21 says, X Siren.
Into a tomb of legend, we found the ancient rites. Those heroes employed, and the Soul Warden Order.
Saracropolis says, Lendir Guide says, X Siren. Blade 21 says, X Siren.
Romano blessed us with a bulwark against corruption's influence. But this gift came at great sacrifice. We would never be the
Render
same
guide
again.
says, Ex-Siren.
Our newfound powers carried us to many victories. I began to believe we could actually vanquish
Blade 21 says, Ex-Siren. Grandmaster 4 says, Exemplary Amulet.
and exploited them. One by one, my fellow wardens became corrupted.
Blade 21 says, Aina says, nice. Grandmaster 4
In a
says,
final act
Exemplary
of
Amulet.
desperation, Constanza and I would lead
The Chocolate says, Exemplary Amulet.
the end. I was alone.
Blade 21 says, Aina says, nice.
I have tried to
Grandmaster
honor
4 says,
the memory of my
Exemplary
fallen friends, Constanza, but the memories
The Chocolate says,
are too
Exemplary
much.
Amulet.
I am no longer a soul warden. There are no soul wardens
Aina says,
anymore.
nice.
I have tried to honor there now the memory of my master. I truly, I
The
am
Chocolate
sorry.
says, Exemplary Amulet.
You have come to me. That is the days of the soul. That would be there. You. There are no soul wardens anymore. I have tried to honor there now the memory of my master. I truly, I am sorry. You have come to me. That is the days of the soul. That would be there. You. There are no soul wardens. There now, the memory of my master. I truly, I am sorry. You have come to me. That is the days of the soul. That would be there. You.
The Chocolate says, Exemplary Amulet. The Chocolate says, Exemplary Amulet. Vikern says, WTS, Major Armoring Crafting Trophy. Blade 21 says, Ex-Siren. The Chocolate says, Exemplary Amulet. Vikern says, WTS, Major Armoring Crafting Trophy. Blade 21 says, Ex-Siren. The Chocolate says, Exemplary Amulet. Loading. Please wait. Vikern says, WTS, Major Armoring Crafting Trophy. Blade 21 says, Ex-Siren. The Chocolate says, Exemplary Amulet. Loading. Please wait. Vikern says, WTS, Major Armoring Crafting Trophy. Relay the Christ says, Ex-Siren. The Chocolate says, Exemplary Amulet. Loading. Please wait. Vikern says, WTS, Major Armoring Crafting Trophy. Blizon Sinti TV says, Ex-Siren. Relay the Rambo 56 says, XWT. The Chocolate says, Exemplary Ring. Please wait. Cabarrus says, WTS, Abyssal Replica Orichalcum Brutish Great Axe, Ignited Replica Orichalcum Brutish Great Axe, Abyssal Replica Orichalcum Brutish Great Axe, Electrified Replica Orichalcum Brutish Great Axe. Leighton says, nice mount, WTS. McNulty says, anyone willing to donate a little 10k I wanna buy a couple houses for trophies. Relay the Christ says, X-Run. Replica Orichalcum Brutish Great Axe. Leighton says, nice mount. WTS. McNulty says, anyone willing to donate a little 10k hyphen I wanna buy a couple houses for trophies. Relay the Chris Leighton says, sweet that is my kid's name. Leighton says, nice mount. McNulty says, anyone willing to donate a little 10k hyphen I wanna Leighton says, well he isn't a kid now. Leighton says, sweet that is my kid's name. Leighton says, oh god I am old. Leighton says, well he isn't a kid now. Leighton says, sweet that is my kid's name. Leighton says, oh god I am old. Relay the Christ says, X siren. Leighton says, well he isn't a kid now. Loading. Please wait. Leighton says, sweet that is my kid's name. Leighton says, oh god I am old. Relay the Christ says, X siren. Leighton says, right, please wait. Coda Bear 21 says, X siren. Leighton says, right, please wait. Leighton says, it has the right stuff, they bever could figure out the economy for one. Leighton says, right. Leighton says, that is it, why grind to make stuff? Leighton says, it has the right stuff, they bever could figure out the economy. Leighton says, drops are better. Leighton says, McNulty says, it's pretty enjoyable. Leighton says, Blade 21 says, X siren. Leighton says, drops are better.
I knew you had it in you. Now that the book craft the you can conquer the world from the back of a good horse, brother. Here is a red wine.
McNulty says, it's pretty enjoyable. Blade 21 says, X siren. Leighton says, the days at the beginning of this game, man it was wild.
Now that the book craft the you can conquer the world from the back of a good horse, brother. Here is a red wine.
McNulty says, it's pretty enjoyable. Blade 21 says, X siren. Leighton says, the days at the beginning of this game, man it was wild.
Now that the book craft the you can conquer the world from the back of a good horse, brother. Here is a red wine.
McNulty says, it's pretty enjoyable. Blade 21 says, X siren. Leighton says, Waiu Mato says, giant sausage. Man it was wild. McNulty says, I remember rushing steel tools just to try to corner the market. McNulty says, selling steel picks for like 5k lol. Waiu Mato says, giant sausage. McNulty says, I remember rushing steel tools just to try to corner the market. McNulty says, selling steel picks for like 5k lol. Waiu Mato says, giant sausage. McNulty says, I remember rushing steel tools just to try to corner the market. McNulty says, selling steel picks for like 5k lol. Waiu Mato says, giant sausage. McNulty says, I remember rushing steel tools just to try to corner the market. McNulty says, selling steel picks for like 5k lol.
Well done. You've shown a rare aptitude for horsemanship. I think even my forefathers will be impressed. But trust between, don't be intimidated by the tracks. They are meant to be difficult. But that difficulty makes you both stronger. So well done. You've shown a rare aptitude for horsemanship. I think even my forefathers will be impressed. But trust between, don't be intimidated by the tracks. They are meant to be difficult. But that difficulty makes you both stronger. So well done. You've shown a rare aptitude for horsemanship. I think even my forefathers will be impressed. But trust between, don't be intimidated by the tracks. They are meant to be difficult. So well done. You've shown a rare aptitude for horsemanship.
Aeternum says, Siren has me sideways again. Loading. Please wait. Saracropolis says, I can see that XD. Aeternum says, Siren has me sideways again. Loading. Please wait. Saracropolis says, I can see that Darvish says, X Siren. Blade 21 says, X Siren. Loading. Please wait. Yu Mato says, XTLC hyphen don't go chasing waterfalls. Siren. Blade 21 says, X Siren. Loading. Please wait. Yu Mato says, XTLC hyphen don't go chasing waterfalls. Siren. Blade 21 says, X Siren. Yu Mato says, XTLC hyphen don't go chasing waterfalls. Xuna X says. Blade 21 says, X Siren. Xuna Suspect Live says, X Fangs hyphen loathe. Xuna Suspect Live says, X Fangs hyphen loathe.
My hunch about this town, but what have you...
Xuna Suspect Live says, X Fangs hyphen loathe.
My hunch about this town, but what have you...
Lily Clarebrook says, GG imp, all four of us lol.
Sniffing for information. Well, get on. She's...
about this town? What have you...
Lily Clarebrook says, GG all four of us lol.
Sniffing for information. We'll get done. She's...
Lily Clarebrook says, GG all four of us lol. Loading. Please wait. Lily Clarebrook says, GG all four of us lol. Loading. Please wait.
You trespass on sacred ground, human. The angry earth do not want you here. I hope you have good cause.
Loading. Please wait. Albie Box says, bruh.
On sacred ground,
You Darvish says, K9 guy did it.
you tread on what was once hallowed ground, human. I hope you have whatever your...
Albie Box says, sure he did. That's why I saw you letting out shamans. Albie Box says,
very
bruh.
well.
You Darvish says, I did that on accident and got scolded in
You
disc.
tread on what was once hallowed ground.
You Darvish says, Ty.
Whatever your...
Albie Box says, the chocolate says, exemplary earring. I saw you letting out shamans. Albie Box says,
very well.
You Darvish says, I did that on accident and got scolded in disc.
You tread on what was once...
Sarah Cropolis says, I saw him, kicked him from raid is all I can do XD. Chocolate says, exemplary earring. I saw you letting out shamans. Albie Box says, very well. You Darvish says, I did that on accident and got scolded in disc. Sarah Cropolis says, I saw a lonely night says, bruh, all I can do XD. You Darvish says, I thought the cage things gave us bonus bags until I was scolded my be on the shaman. Sarah Cropolis says, I saw a lonely night says, bruh, all I can do XD. You Darvish says, I thought the cage things gave us bonus bags until I was scolded my be on the shaman. A lonely night says, bruh, I can do XD. You Darvish says, I thought the cage things gave us bonus bags until I was scolded my be on the shaman. Oppressive says, dude. Oppressive says, dude. Oppressive says, dude. Sarah Cropolis says, imp next. Sarah Cropolis says, imp next. Suspect Live says, X-lip critic -static dress. Cybertooth says, Ufmo crybaby oper, ________. Cybertooth says, son belong to Cyber. Suspect Cybertooth says, comply. -static dress.
The Earth's secret ways.
Cybertooth says, Saracropolis says, no, son belong to Sora.
Not be forgotten.
Sweet Caroline says, same comment every time from Cyber lol. Yu Mato says, bum bum bum.
We are grateful for your. Our secrets belong. You have done your part, but I warn you, the perhaps angry Earth.
Sweet Caroline says, same comment every time from Cyber lol. Yu Mato says, bum bum bum.
We are grateful for your. Our secrets belong. You have done your part, but I warn you, the perhaps angry Earth.
Sweet Caroline says, same comment every time from Cyber lol. Yu Mato says, bum bum bum.
We are grateful for your. Our secrets belong.
Connor says, most of us are just AI chatbots at Sweet Caroline. Athena says, Ximp. Sweet Caroline says, same 3D. Connor says, most of us are just AI chatbots at Sweet Caroline. Athena says, Ximp. Sweet Caroline says, same 3D. Connor says, most of us are just AI chatbots at Sweet Caroline. Grandmaster 4 says, exemplary ring, WTS. Connor says, lol beat boop 07. Same 3D poop says, most of us are just AI chatbots at Sweet Caroline. Grandmaster 4 says, exemplary ring, WTS. Connor says, lol beat boop 07. Same 3D poop. Grandmaster 4 says, exemplary ring, WTF. Connor says, lol beat boop 07. YN Otani says, Ximp. Ryan O'Connor says, Ximp. Ryan O'Connor says, Ximp. Saracropolis says, Imp 19/20. Charlie VR says, plus Imp.
There now. That will afford you some protection. I communed with the elements well. Your sincerity has. But I think it. While they may.
Saracropolis says, Imp 19/20. Charlie VR says, plus Imp.
There now. That will afford you some protection. I communed with the elements well. Your sincerity has. But I think it. While they
A
may.
Lonely Knight says, GG Siren Killers 3. Saracropolis says, Imp 19/20. Charlie VR says, plus Imp.
That will afford you some protection. I communed with the elements well. Your sincerity has. But I think it. While
A
they may.
Lonely Knight says, GG Siren Killers 3. Saracropolis says, Imp 19/20. Tony Loco says, lol. X Una X says, no, Sir Night Tai. Tony Loco says, yeah. Tony Loco says, lol. Xuna X says, no, so night tide. MC Goon says, Xion. Tony Loco says, yeah. Tony Loco says, oh. Xuna X says, no, so night tide. Ana says, any imp going says, Xion. Tony Loco says, yeah. Yu Mato says, yay imp just started. Rambo 56 says, yes. Ana says, Xion. Saracropolis says, imp raid 1 full. Xuna X says, maybe. Yu Mato says, yay imp just started. Rambo 56 says, yes. Ana says, Xion. Saracropolis says, imp raid 1 full. Xuna X says, maybe. Mato says, yay imp just started. Rambo 56 says, Ana says, Xion. Saracropolis says, imp raid 1 full. Xuna X says, maybe. Mato says, yay imp just started. Rambo 56 says, Ana says, Xion. Vocable says, X-Gorg. Sweet Caroline says, Q Muts PLZ and Thai XD. Vocable says, X-Gorg. Sweet Caroline says, Q Muts PLZ and Thai XD. Athena says, X-Imp.
This island throngs with such sources of power. I will find them all and fortify our cause. The cause of human.
Zero says, X-Imp. Athena says, X-Imp.
I will find them all and fortify.
You will join us on the grave of life.
Zero says, X-Imp. Athena says, X-Imp.
The resistance is losing.
resist the God, but you have seen the truth and the vision. Please, waste no more time resisting. Seize your birthright and join me. And the vision. Please, waste no more time resisting.
Sweet Caroline says, DPS Q Muds, heals and tank QD. Dalton the Ginger 7 says, remember when AGS wasn't gay as Bleep and actually cared about this game? Pepperidge Farm remembers. Cybertooth says, no random Ginger 7 says, remember when AGS wasn't gay as Bleep and actually cared about this game? Pepperidge Farm remembers. Cybertooth says, with no random Ginger 7 says, Copehead says, anyone still play this? YU Mato says, there are dozens of us. Copehead says, anyone still play this? Sweet Caroline says, a few dozens even. YU Mato says, there are dozens of us. Copehead says, anyone still play this? Sweet Caroline says, MC Goon says, sup cyber. YU Mato says, there are dozens of us. Says, sup cyber. Pandan says, wait, has cyber finally upgraded to cyber iron slash? MC Goon says, in the works. Cybertooth says, lol cyber lord now. Pandan says, wait, has cyber finally upgraded to cyber iron slash? Cybertooth says, formable. MC Goon says, in the works. Cybertooth says, lol cyber lord now. Sweet Caroline says, is that French? Cybertooth says, formable. MC Goon says, in the works. MC Goon says, cyber you like the new raid? Sweet Caroline says, is that Pandan says, I'm still waiting for Cyberworm. MC Goon says, cyber you like the new raid? Sweet Caroline says, is that Pandan Cybertooth says, I'm just here till 18th next, then I won't be. Cybertooth says, lol. Sweet Caroline says, Q Muds BB, need DPS to press buttons and DMG stuff. Cybertooth says, month. Sweet Caroline says, Q Muds BB, need DPS to press buttons and DMG stuff. Dalton the Ginger 7 says, dozens is wild XD.
The Earth. I assume you informed the...
We don't need DPS to press buttons and DMG stuff. Dalton the Ginger 7 says, dozens is wild XD.
The Earth. I assume you informed the... We don't...
Dalton the Ginger 7 says, dozens is wild XD. Sweet Caroline says, DPSQ random mutts are NPLZ and tie.
The Earth. I assume you informed
Dalton the Ginger 7 says, dozens is wild XD. Sweet Caroline says, DPSQ random mutts are NPLZ and tie. William and W says, long time no see.
I prefer to be.
Aphrodite 85 says, what will your lil Padwins gonna do without mighty Cyber's guidance after 18?
You have what you came.
Cybertooth says, sweet ask foe help REM when help came to you. William and W says, long time no see.
I prefer to be.
Aphrodite 85 says, what will your lil Padwins gonna do without mighty Cybertooth says, my time is over you pray.
You came.
Cybertooth says, sweet ask foe help REM when help came to you. William and W says, long time no see. Aphrodite 85 says, what will your lil Padwins gonna do without mighty Cybertooth says, my time is over you pray. Says, Pos going to take sun when Cyber leaves. Ask foe help REM when help came to you. I think Emanu says, leave it gray. Cybertooth says, my time MC Boon says, Pos going to take sun when Cyber leaves. Sarah Cropolis says, at a next. Cybertooth says, I will leave sun to my formidable Padawan. Says, leave it gray. Sarah Cropolis says, at a next. Cybertooth says, I will leave sun to my formidable Padawan. Says, leave it gray. MC Boon says, XD. MC Boon says, XD. MC Boon says, XD. Dalton the Ginger 7 says, exemplary earring, 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 buy it all for 1K. Dalton the Ginger 7 says, exemplary earring, exemplary earring, exemplary earring. Sarah Cropolis says, at a starting 2 minutes. Exemplary earring, exemplary earring, exemplary earring, exemplary earring, exemplary earring, buy it all for 1K. Zero says, where does at a start earn? Ginger 7 says, exemplary earring, exemplary earring, exemplary earring. Sarah Cropolis says, at a starting 2 minutes. Exemplary earring, exemplary earring. Exemplary earring, exemplary earring, buy it all for 1K. Zero says, where does at a start earn? Sarah Cropolis says, at a starting 2 minutes. Ziaiku says, interested in wars? Join the Eden Grove War AR8 Pensum. DM me if interested. Albi Bach says, Tialian Shan Shrine. Sarah Cropolis says, Tialian Shan Shrine in North Ebon Scale. Ziaiku says, interested in wars? Join the Eden Grove War AR8 Pensum. DM me if interested. Albi Bach says, Tialian Shan Shrine. Sarah Cropolis says, Tialian Shan Shrine in North Ebon Scale. Ziaiku says, interested in wars? Join the Eden Grove War AR8 Pensum. shall try. Sarah Crawford says, "Everyone shall try and make it useful."
It is done. I thought if you are still keen on, he will want.
Saracropolis says, "Ada started." Saracropolis says, "I'ma finish packing my bowl though." Saracropolis says, "Ada started." Saracropolis says, "I'ma finish packing my bowl though." Saracropolis says, "Ada started." Saracropolis says, "I'ma finish packing my bowl though." Saracropolis says, "Ada started." Saracropolis says, "I'ma finish packing my bowl though." Cybertooth says, "Follow." Cybertooth says, "Follow." Cybertooth says, "Follow." Cybertooth says, "Follow." Loading. Please wait. Loading. Please wait.
It is a relief to see you were able. I'm not surprised. We have but one component of our. Through it, when for the only the ancients disappear. It is a relief to see you were able. I'm not surprised. We have but one component of our. Through it, when for the only the ancients disappear. It is a relief to see you were able. I'm not surprised. We have but one component of our. Through it, when for the only the ancients disappear.
Dalton the Ginger 7 says, "Everything must go. Buy everything I own for 1K. Dalton the Ginger 7 says, Nightfall's Torment medium boots, Gorgon's sandals, Nightfall's Torment medium boots, Gorgon's hand covers, cloth shirt, cloth shoes, cloth shirt, Nightfall's Torment light boots, cloth shirt, cloth pants, cloth shoes, cloth hat, Nightfall's Torment light boots, Gorgon's sandals, Nightfall's Torment. McNulty says, looking for about 10k to buy houses, donations welcome. Cloth shirt, Nightfall's Dalton the Ginger 7 says, Gorgon's sandals, Nightfall's Torment light boots, cloth hat, cloth shoes, cloth hat, cloth shirt, cloth gloves, cloth shirt, Grimhild's Hex Solaret, cloth pants, Nightfall's Torment light leggings, cloth pants, Circe's Enchanted wraps, cloth pants, light boots, cloth hat, cloth shoes, Dalton the Ginger 7 says, cloth pants, exemplary earring, 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 cloth pants, exemplary earring, cloth shirt, cloth pants, cloth shoes, Bafana's bewitched leggings, exemplary earring. Dalton the Ginger 7 says, cloth pants, cloth shoes, cloth shoes, exemplary earring, exemplary earring, cloth shoes, cloth pants, exemplary earring, exemplary earring, exemplary earring, cloth pants, exemplary earring, exemplary earring, cloth pants, cloth pants. MC Goon says, she'll give you 1k to salvage all that. Exemplary earring. Hanami says, ignited replica Orichalcum brutish rapier, ignited replica Orichalcum brutish spear, WTS. Exemplary earring. Dalton the Ginger 7 says, exemplary earring, exemplary earring, exemplary earring, cloth pants, exemplary earring, exemplary earring, exemplary earring, cloth shoes, cloth pants, exemplary earring, exemplary earring, cloth pants, cloth shoes, exemplary earring, exemplary earring, exemplary earring, exemplary. Dalton the Ginger 7 says, at MC Goon deal, exemplary earring, Unspea Cable Noah says, he'll give 4k for all of it. Exemplary earring. Unspea Cable Noah says, now. Cloth shoes, exemplary. Unspea Cable Noah says, fine, I got offer. Dalton the Ginger 7 Krusty says, he'll give 2k to salvage all that. Unspea Cable Noah Grandmaster 4 says, lol. Unspea Cable Noah says, gold ingot, 1 gold ingot for all of it. Unspea Cable Noah says, loading. Please wait. Krusty says, Unspea Cable Noah says that. Sarah Cropolis says, WT going CK. Zib says, XWT, 1 gold ingot for all of it. Dalton the Ginger 7 says, at Krusty in the lead with 2k to salvage it all. Wanhi says, XWT. Sarah Cropolis says, MC Goon says, 3k. Unspea Cable Noah says, 3.1k. Dalton the Ginger 7 says, Afru says, 3.1k final offer. Afru says, damn, XWT. Unspea Cable Noah says, yes, 3k. Unspea Cable Noah says, Discord, 3.1k. Unspea Cable Noah says, show me you salvage all it. Final offer. Krusty says, Magoon, how about we give 3k each for him to salvage all that? Unspea Cable Noah says, yes. Zib says, XWT. Unspea Cable Noah says, Unspea Cable Noah says, bros losing 100k. Says, show me you salvage all. Unspea Cable Noah says, of Mats. Krusty says, Magoon, how about we Krusty says, he has to start a Twitch for us. Afru says, XWT. Renvin says, XWT 100k. McNulty says, anyone willing to give 10k for a poor player in these end stage times. Krusty says, he has to start. Jitch says, let's make Shane great again. Afru says, XWT. Sarah Cropolis says, CK starting. Renvin says, XWT 100k. McNulty says, anyone okay, Bet says, idiot, poor player in these end stage times. Krusty says, he has to start. Jitch says, let's make Shane great again. Apple says XW. Saracropolis says CK starting. London says XWT. Saracropolis says no you idiot. Okay bet says true. Unspeakable Noah says XCK. Saracropolis says 3. Saracropolis says no you. Okay bet says 3. Okay bet says true. Unspeakable Noah says XCK. Saracropolis says 3. Saracropolis says no you. Okay bet says 3. Okay bet says true. Unspeakable Noah says XCK. Saracropolis says 3.
We have but one component of our conduit.
Okay, that
Vital
sounds
though it
true.
will
Aphrodite 85 says, need Dandan carry.
have but one component of our conduit. Vital though it
Aphrodite 85 says, need Dandan carry. 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 The Resurrected says, what about mood random Q? Aphrodite 85 says, need Webier. The Resurrected says, what about mood random Q? Aphrodite 85 says, need Webier. The Resurrected says, what about mood random Q? Dalton the Ginger 7 says, the bad part is I have like 10x that amount of gear. Tradesman Bob Zero says, controller players. Damn. Aina says, in King Random Mood. Loading. Dalton Please the Ginger wait. 7 says, the bad part is I had like 10x that amount of gear. Aphrodite 85 says, need 3 floor mats for board, please be cyber trained. Damn. Dalton the Ginger 7 says, I spent probably 3-4 mil rolling gear before the game was bleep murdered. Unspeakable Noah says, X-Gorg X DPS, need 3 floor mats for board, please be cyber trained. Dalton the Ginger 7 says, I spent probably 3-4 mil rolling gear before the game was bleep murdered. Unspeakable Noah says, X-Gorg X DPS. Please be cyber trained. Dalton the Ginger 7 says, I spent probably 3-4 mil rolling gear before the game was bleep murdered. Unspeakable Noah says, X-Gorg X DPS. New Christo says, crafting and crafters especially have been getting bent over since the game launched. Two Eyes says, frozen replica Orichalcum brutish great axe, exemplary amulet, 2 gems RM / counter and bruiser almu. Especially have been getting bent over since the game launched.
Yes, you may need to be resourceful.
Ilawan Rowan says, is there anyone on from Cost 2 that can queue the town boards in Restless? Exemplary amulet, 2 gems RM / counter and bruiser almu. Especially have been getting bent over since the game launched.
Yes, you may need to be resourceful.
Ilawan Rowan says, is there anyone on from Cost 2 that can queue the town boards in Restless? Exemplary amulet, 2 gems RM / counter and bruiser almu. I think Emanu says, Psalm 1 at Merc. Ilawan Rowan says, is there anyone on from Cost 2 that can queue the town boards in Restless? Exemplary amulet, 2 gems RM / counter and bruiser almu. I think Emanu says, Psalm 1 at Merc. Ilawan Rowan says, is there anyone on from Cost 2 that can queue the town boards in Restless? Tawakamono says, interested in wars? Sign up for War in Eden. 8 pensum. DM me if interested. Tawakamono says, interested in wars? Sign up for War in Eden. 8 pensum. DM me if interested. Says, interested in wars. Tawakamono says, interested in wars. 8 pensum. Sign up for War in Eden. Me if interested. 8 pensum. DM me if interested. Says, interested in wars. Sign up for War in Eden. 8 pensum. DM me if interested. Says, interested in wars. Tawakamono says, interested in wars. 8 pensum. Sign up for War in Eden. Me if interested. 8 pensum. DM me if interested. Says, interested in wars. Sign up for War in Eden. 8 pensum. DM me if interested. Says, interested in wars. Tawakamono says, interested in wars. 8 pensum. Sign up for War in Eden. Me if interested. 8 pensum. DM me if interested. Says, interested in wars. Sign up for War in Eden. 8 pensum. DM me if interested. Says, interested in wars. Tawakamono says, interested in wars. 8 pensum. Sign up for War in Eden. 8 pensum. DM me if interested. Interested in wars. Sign up for War in Eden. 8 pensum. DM me if interested. Interested in wars. Tawakamono says, interested in wars. Sign up for War in Eden. 8 pensum. DM me if interested. 0p says, X-Way. 0p says, XWT. Zero P says X-Way. 0p says XWT. Sweet Caroline says X Hive Heels. Sweet Caroline says X High Heels. Sweet Caroline says X High Heels.
Wait, you're saying they were together until odd.
Aphrodite 85 says, need 1 floor mats for Gord, please be cyber trained.
Wait, you're saying they were together until odd.
Aphrodite 85 says, need 1 floor mats for Gord, please be cyber trained. Aphrodite 85 says, need 1 floor mats for Gord, please be cyber trained. Aphrodite 85 says, need 1 floor mats for Gord, please be cyber trained. MC Goon says, save me a spot. The Resurrected says, nobody random moot. MC Goon says, I'm cyber trained. MC Goon says, save me a spot. The Resurrected says, nobody random moot. MC Goon says, I'm cyber trained. Sweet Caroline says, I'm in queue for mutts, but there must not be a tank QD. The Resurrected says, nobody random moot. MC Goon says, I'm cyber trained. Sweet Caroline says, I'm in queue for mutts, but there must not be a tank QD. The Resurrected says, nobody random moot. MC Goon says, I'm cyber trained. Sweet Caroline says, I'm in queue
Welcome
for
to the
mutts,
Autumn
but there
Rest.
must not be
Always a
tank
colourful
QD.
place to be.
Sir Omar 1 says, ex-Marik.
Welcome to the Autumn Rest. Always a colourful place to be.
Sir Omar 1 says, ex-Marik.
Welcome to the Autumn Rest. Always a colorful place to be.
Sir Omar 1 says, Ex-Marik.
Welcome to the Autumn Rest. Always a colorful place to be.
Sir Omar 1 says, Ex-Marik. The Resurrected says, please my tanks random moot. The Resurrected says, please my tanks random moot. J Atlas says, can after Merc race. Daro says, is this game dead? The Resurrected says, please my tanks random moot. J Atlas says, can after Merc race. Sweet Caroline says, Daro PLZ. Says, is this game dead? Lies on Cinti TV says, no. Sarah Cropolis says, GGSWT, thanks for joining me. Blade 21 says, tie. Sweet Caroline says, Daro PLZ. Is this game dead? Lies on Cinti TV says, no. Xuna X says, Ty Sara WT, thanks for joining me. Blade 21 says, Ty. A Lonely Night says, Sara Tivm for hosting WT. Sarah Cropolis says, 3. Zero says, Ty Sara. Albi Bach says, Ty for Tour Sara. Athena says, Ty for WT. For hosting WT. Ilayan Rowan says, is anyone on from Oyada that can queue town boards please? Zero says, U Darvish says, GGS. Albi Bach says, Lies on Cinti TV says, X Trib. Athena says, Run You Full says, X Merc. Ilayan Rowan says, is anyone on from Oyada that can queue town boards please? Zero says, U Darvish says, GGS. Albi Bach says, Lies on Cinti TV says, X Trib. Athena says, Run You Full says, X Merc. Ilayan Rowan says, is anyone on from Online Gamer says, X Merc. Zero says, U Darvish says, GGS. Daro says, it's been a while since I've played, but I remember Pridwin being packed not just 5 people. Says, X Merc. La Mojo Jojo says, X Merc. Online Gamer Lies on Cinti TV says, X. Relay the Christ says, X Merc. Says, it's been a while since I've played. 21 says, X Merc. Pack not just 5 people. U Darvish says, X Merc. Jojo says, X Merc. Online Liza Yavota says, X Merc. Relay the Christ says, Lies on Cinti TV says, X Merc. Blade 21 says, X Merc. Pack not just 5 people. U Darvish says, X Merc. Pestilence says, X Merc. Sir Omar 1 says, X Merc. Relay the Christ says, Lies on Cinti TV says, X Merc. The Resurrected says, think about my tank, Q random moot. U Darvish says, X Merc. Pestilence says, X Merc. Sir Omar 1 says, X Merc. Okanon says, X Merc. The Resurrected says, think about my tank. Lies on Cinti TV says, X Merc. Renvin says, X Merc. Pestilence says, X Merc. The Chocolate says, X Merc. The Resurrected says, think about my tank. Lies on Cinti TV says, X Merc. Renvin says, James Sadawas says, X Merc. Pestilence says, X Merc. The chocolate says, X-Merc. X-Merc. The resurrected says, think about my tang. Maximus V1 says, X-Merc. Zero says, X-Merc. Says, X-Merc. La Mojo Jojo says, X-Merc. The chocolate says, X-Merc. X-Merc. The resurrected says, think about my tang. Maximus V1 says, X-Merc. Zero says, X-Merc. Pestilence says, X-Merc. Jojo says, X-Merc. The chocolate says, X-Merc. The chocolate says, X-Merc. Sweet Caroline says, why all the Merc X? Only one portal and it's in progress. X-Merc. Pestilence says, X-Merc. Jojo says, X-Merc. The chocolate says, X-Merc. Sweet Caroline says, Zero says, X-Merc. Only one portal and it's in progress. Pestilence says, X-Merc. Pestilence says, portals don't do anything really. Chocolate says, X-Merc. Sweet Caroline says, Zero says, you just chests. Only one portal and it's in progress. Pestilence says, X-Merc. Pestilence says, portals don't do anything really. Chocolate says, X-Merc. Relay the Christ says, Merc. Zero says, you just Pestilence says, actually easier if no portals. Pestilence says, Bullwinkle says, Merc rewards 800 plus coins for closing 3 portals. Relay the Christ says, Merc. Sweet Caroline says, oh, no fun po, but I get it. No portals. Bullwinkle says, Merc rewards 800 plus coins for closing 3 portals. Sir Omar 1 says, X-Merc. Sweet Caroline says, oh, no fun po. Pestilence says, X-Merc. Bullwinkle says, also I think lodestones fetch a good price. Bullwinkle says, Merc rewards 800 plus coins for closing 3 portals. Sir Omar 1 says, X-Merc. A Lonely Night says, also check leaderboards for Briggs closed. X-Merc. Bullwinkle says, also I think lodestones fetch a good price. Bullwinkle says, Merc rewards 800 plus coins for closing 3 portals. Sir Omar 1 says, X-Merc. A Lonely Night says, Pestilence says, don't need gold now. X-Merc. Bullwinkle says, also I think lodestones fetch a good price. A Lonely Night says, you'll see some familiar names. A Lonely Night Bullwinkle says, oh, give me some THN. Nug O'Malley says, leaderboards are closed and no longer progress. A Lonely Sweet Caroline says, I don't need any but I'll take some 2-3 XD. Bullwinkle says, oh, Ballroom says, exemplary ring, WTS. Nug O'Malley says, leaderboards are closed and no longer progress. Sweet Caroline says, Sweet Caroline says, Molten Slag, WTSXD. Ballroom says, exemplary ring, WTS. Nug O'Malley says, leaderboards are closed and no longer progress. Sweet Caroline says, Sweet Caroline says, Molten Slag, WTSXD. Ballroom says, exemplary ring, WTS. Nug O'Malley says, leaderboards are closed and no longer progress. Sweet Caroline says, Sweet Caroline says, Molten Slag, WTSXD. Ballroom says, exemplary ring, WTS. Nug O'Malley says, leaderboards are closed and no longer progress. Sweet Caroline says, Sweet Caroline says, Molten Slag, WTSXD. Ballroom says, exemplary ring, WTS. Nug O'Malley says, leaderboards are closed and no longer progress. Sweet Caroline says, Molten Slag, X Blunderbussy 69 says, is that purple taking WW? Ilayan Rowan says, is anyone on from Maya that can cue the town boards in Everfall please purple taking WW? Ilayan Rowan says, is anyone on from Maya that can cue the town boards in Everfall please purple taking WW? Marin Sawville says, could also use them in MB and all the other places XD. Says, is anyone on from Maya that can cue the town boards in Everfall please Chiefs 73 says, Spectral Turkey Mount Box, WTS. Marin Sawville says, could also use them in MB and all the other places XD. Ilayan Rowan says, yep. I'm basically TPing between towns and doing town boards, and when I find one empty asking in chat if someone can queue them. Marin Sawville says, could also use them in MB and all the other places XD. Ilayan Rowan says, yeah. Marin Sawville says, welcome to the Town Board Whiners Association, D. Find one empty asking in chat if Ilayan Rowan says, trying to get the Terry XP up. Marin Sawville says, I do it a fair amount. Ilayan Rowan says, yeah. Marin Sawville says, welcome to the Town Board Whiners Association, D. Find one empty asking in chat if Ilayan Rowan says, trying to get the Terry XP up. Marin Sawville says, I do it a fair amount. Ilayan Rowan says, yeah. Marin Sawville says, welcome to the Town Board Whiners Association, D. Ilayan Rowan says, trying to get the Terry XP up. Marin Sawville says, I do it a fair amount. Tawakamono says, interested in wars? Sign up for War in Eden. 8 pensum. DM me if interested. Tawakamono says, interested in wars? Sign up for War in Eden. 8 pensum. DM me if interested. Interested in wars? Tawakamono says, interested in wars? 8 pensum. Sign up for War in Eden. If interested. 8 pensum. DM me if interested. Interested in wars? Sign up for War in Eden. 8 pensum. DM me if interested. Interested in wars? Tawakamono says, interested in wars? 8 pensum. Sign up for War in Eden. Interested. 8 pensum. DM me if interested. Interested in wars? Sign up for War in Eden. 8 pensum. 2 Eyes says, frozen replica Orichalcum brutish great axe, exemplary amulet, WTS. Sign up for War in Eden. 8 pensum. DM me if interested. Interested in wars? Sign up for War in Eden. 8 pensum. 2 Eyes says, frozen replica Orichalcum brutish great axe, exemplary amulet, WTS. Sign up for War in Eden. 8 pensum. DM me if interested. Interested in wars? Two Eyes says, frozen replica Orichalcum brutish great axe, exemplary amulet, WTS. 0P says, X-Merc. 2 Eyes says, frozen replica Orichalcum brutish great axe, exemplary amulet, WTS. 0P says, X-Merc. P says, X-Merc. Loading. Please wait. Zero P says Xmer. Loading. Please wait. Loading. Please wait. X Blunderbussy 69 says, thanks. X Blunderbussy 69 says, thanks. X Blunderbussy 69 says, thanks. Elian Rowan says, can the owners of Restless Shore, Cutlass Keys, Everfall, Monarch's Bluffs, and Ebonscale please queue town boards? 3. Elian Rowan says, can the owners of Restless Shore, Cutlass Keys, Everfall, Monarch's Bluffs, and Ebonscale please queue town boards? 3. Garma C says, keep calling. J Atlas says, decline mutts. Garma C says, keep calling. J Atlas says, decline mutts. Kayaku says, in. J Atlas says, decline mutts. Kayaku says, in. Dollhouse says, LF depths regular hyphen my first time hyphen join my lobby 3. Kayaku says, Dollhouse says, LF depths regular hyphen my first time hyphen join my lobby 3. Regular hyphen my first time hyphen join my lobby 3. Bot 4456 says, Nerf bow. Bot 4456 says, Nerf bow. Who says, X cave? Who says, McShadow says, X siren. Loading. Please wait. Who says, McShadow says, X siren. Loading. Please wait. McShadow says, X siren. Loading. Please wait. Joey I says, X cave. Joey I says, X cave. Who says, LFM4 Cave March 20th. Who says, LFM4 Cave March 20th. Who says, LFM4 Cave March 20th. Lord Vaco says, X-Siren. Boo says, LFM4 Cave March 20th. X Blunderbussy 69 says, a lot of yellows taking Everfall. Passive Menace says, X Cave. Who says, LFM4 Cave March 20th. X Blunderbussy 69 says, a lot of yellows taking Everfall. Passive Menace says, X Cave. X Blunderbussy 69 says 75%. X Blunderbussy 69 says 75%. Passive Menace says, X Cave. What says, who needs help with anything? X Cave. Healer Danny says, way. Healer Danny says, what? X Una X says, Q Rando Mutts. What says, a Lonely Night says, that name Crazy XD. What says, what? Healer Danny says, way. Healer Danny says, what? Healer Danny says, Lord Vaco says, X Siren. X Una X says, Q Rando Healer Danny says, XG. A Lonely Night says, McNulty says, looking for a small 10k donation so I can buy houses and put up trophies. Healer Danny says, go earn it you bum. Lord Vaco says, Wick says, WTB stopping power to charm. Someone sell me one PLZ. McNulty says, looking for a small McNulty says, true. So I can buy houses and put up trophies. Healer Danny says, go earn it you bum. Rick says, WTB stopping power to charm. Someone sell me one PLZ. McNulty says, true. I can buy houses and put up trophies. Healer Danny says, go earn it you bum. Elvin Rain 13 says, X Siren. Elvin Rain 13 says, X Siren. A Lonely Night says, X Siren Tank. Zimpo says, X Siren. X Una X says, Q Rando Mutts PLZ. Lord Vaco says, X-Siren. Rain 13 says, X-Siren. A Lonely Night says, X-Siren Tank. Zimpo says, X-Siren. Xuna X says, Q Randomuts PLZ. Lord Vaco says, X-Siren. A Lonely Night says, X-Siren Tank. Zimpo says, X-Siren. Ballroom says, WTB Jewelry Matrix. Says, Q Randomuts PLZ. God Angst says, X-Siren. Lord Vaco says, X-Siren. Ballroom says, WTB Jewelry Matrix. God Angst says, X-Siren. Zimpo says, Siren. Boo says, LFM4 Cave April 20th. Pestilence says, X-Siren. Elven Rain 13 says, X-Siren. Boo says, LFM4 Cave April 20th. Pestilence says, X-Siren. Elven Rain 13 says, X-Siren. Bullwinkle says, X-Siren. A Lonely Night says, X-Siren. Bullwinkle says, X-Siren. Ballroom says, Exemplary Ring, WTS current offer 300k. A Lonely Night says, X-Siren. Bullwinkle says, X-Siren. Ballroom says, Exemplary Ring, WTS current offer 300k. Lord Vaco says, X-Siren. Lies on Sinti TV says, Cursed Skills is better. Okanon says, Damn nice ring. Lord Vaco says, A Lonely Night says, X up for a siren run. Lies on Sinti TV says, Cursed Skills is better. A Lonely Night says, July 20th. Ring. A Lonely Night says, X up for a siren run. A Lonely Night says, July 20th. What says, Exemplary Ring? Xuna X says, Q Randomuts. Eduardinho Kill says, X-Siren. What says, Exemplary Ring? Xuna X says, Q Randomuts. Eduardinho Kill says, X-Siren. What says, Exemplary Ring? Xuna X says, Q Randomuts. Ballroom says, Exemplary Ring, WTS2. Ballroom says, Exemplary Ring, WTS2. 25 says, X Siren. Pestilence says, Siren starting soon X up. 25 says, X Zimpo says, come Siren. Joey I says, X up for cave. Eduardinho Kill says, X Siren. Vicen says, X Siren. Says, Siren starting soon X 0P says, X Siren. Zimpo says, come Siren. Grandmaster 4 says, exemplary ring, 50k. Up for cave. Eduardinho Kill says, X Siren. Pestilence says, November 20th Siren. 0P Ballroom says, WTB Jewelry Matrix in bulk 11.5k each. Exemplary ring, 50k. Aisha Shetty says, exemplary ring. Pestilence says, November 20th Siren. Ballroom says, WTB Jewelry Matrix in bulk 11.5k each. Boo says, XK. Aisha Shetty says, exemplary ring. Pestilence says, Siren starting. WTB Jewelry Matrix in bulk 11.5k each. Boo says, XK. Aisha Shetty says, exemplary ring. Pestilence says, Siren starting. Who says, XP? Loading. Please wait. Loading. Please wait. Boo says, LFM4 Cave April 20th. Boo says, LFM4 Cave April 20th. Duke Abigor says, X Siren. X Una X says, Duke Boo says, Duke Abigor says, X Siren. X says, Duke Loading. Please wait. Loading. Please wait. Zero says, X Siren. Duke Abigor says, Duo Piaig. X Una X says, Tank needed SSN1. Albi Bach says, as what YQ for mutts and then just leave. Bismillah 23 says, WTB a few hot pots for a fair price. Whoever has the hot pot up on market for 20k, get off the crack pipe. Joey I says, X up for cave. As what YQ for mutts and then Fair Doji Dog says, tank quit upon and Terry into random mutations. Need a tank to quit for random mutations please. The hot pot up on market for 20. Grissaw says, Haramdulillah. J Atlas says, X Siren. Fair Doji Dog says, tank quit upon and Terry into random mutations. Need a tank to quit for random mutations please. Loading. Please wait. Fair Doji Dog says, Ty VN Rage. Rajcast says, Ew. Rajcast says, Sec. Chief 73 says, Spectral Turkey Mount Box, WTS. Fair Doji Dog says, Ty VN Rage. Rajcast says, Ew. Rajcast says, Sec. Chief 73 says, Spectral Turkey Mount Box, WTS. Fair Doji Dog says, Ty VN Rage. Rajcast says, Ew. Rajcast says, Sec. Chief 73 says, Spectral Turkey Mount Box, WTS. Fair Doji Dog says, Ty VN Rage. Rajcast says, Ew. Rajcast says, Sec. Chief 73 says, Spectral Turkey Mount Box, WTS. Kyofu says, wait, what mads should I be using when I craft double gem weapons? I just rolled a purple weep with 1 perk XD. Loading. Please wait. Kyofu says, wait, what select character screen when I craft double gem press weapons? Square to continue. I just rolled a purple weep with 1 perk XD.